LeBron James has hit yet another milestone, this time doing something no other NBA player has ever done. After another monster year of earnings, totaling $121.2 million last year, Forbes estimates that James has officially become a billionaire. The 37-year-old superstar has a net worth of $1 billion by Forbes' count. James, who's missing the playoffs for just the fourth time in 19 seasons, is the first active NBA player to make the billionaires list. Michael Jordan, the only other basketball billionaire, didn't hit 10 figures until 2014, more than a decade after he retired, thanks to a well-timed investment in the Charlotte Hornets basketball team. James has maximized his business with more than $1.2 billion in pre-tax earnings. He has commanded more than $385 million in salary from the Cleveland Cavaliers, Miami Heat, and Los Angeles Lakers as the NBA's highest-paid active player. Off the court, he has raked in upwards of $900 million in income from endorsements and other business ventures. Born in Akron, Ohio, James lived with an assortment of family members, friends, neighbors, and his Pee-wee football coach, moving a dozen times in 3 years, before becoming the most hyped high school basketball prospect of all time. He inked his first deal with Nike in 2003 at age 18, famously rejecting offers from Reebok and Adidas in favor of what he saw as the better long-term partner. After more than a decade of success, he struck a lifetime agreement with Nike in late 2015 that pays him tens of millions annually. Last year, thanks to Nike, plus deals with brands like AT&T, PepsiCo, and Walmart, he was the second highest earning athlete in the world. But the real key to James's billion-dollar fortune, he's been more than just a pitchman. James has long structured deals to give him equity in brands he partners with, giving him a cut of the upside instead of a quick paycheck. In 2015, James walked away from an endorsement agreement with McDonald's, worth an estimated $15 million over 4 years, to instead gamble on the fast-growing Blaze Pizza chain, where he's an investor. He's taken equity in brands like smart gym maker Tonal and rideshare giant Lyft as well. Then there's Spring Hill, the TV and movie production outfit built by James and business partner Maverick Carter. Last October, outside investors bought into the venture, which helped produce the $163 million Space Jam: A New Legacy and HBO documentary What's My Name, Muhammad Ali, at a $725 million valuation. James, of course, remains the biggest shareholder. James has publicly dreamed about one day owning an NBA team, and he's well on his way. The basketball star already counts pro baseball, soccer, and hockey teams among his holdings. But his fortune wouldn't be complete without his real estate holdings. He owns at least 3 properties worth about $80 million in all. He built a $10 million mansion near his hometown of Akron, Ohio, and he bought an 8-bedroom property in LA for $23 million. His latest splurge? A 13,000 square foot Beverly Hills mansion. James paid $36.75 million for the home, which he has already torn down to replace with a mansion of his own.
For years, there's been this science fiction trope of conflict in the future being defined by large numbers of swarming drones or autonomous systems. But it's not just a sci-fi trope. This is also what a lot of war planners and a lot of people looking at the future of the military believe is going to be the future. Anduril Industries is a defense product company that builds defense technology and then sells it to the United States government and our allies around the world. The thing that makes us special and the thing that makes us different from a lot of other contractors is that we use our own money to fund almost all of our research and development, and then we build products and then we sell them after they're done. So we're usually not going to the government and saying, here's an idea, here's a white paper, you're gonna pay for it whether it works or not. We're saying, look, we are gonna use our own money on this. We're gonna make sure that it works, and no matter what, if you're spending money on it, it is a sure thing. Our military industrial base, the large defense primes that are willing to work with the DoD, don't have the best people, tools, or talent in areas like autonomy, robotics, sensor fusion, high-end networking, immersive displays. And what I wanted to do was build a new company where we could take people out of roles in big tech and put them to work helping with national security. So my last company was Oculus VR. I started it when I was 19 years old, living in a camper trailer. Something that not a lot of people know is that before starting Oculus, which everyone does know about, I actually worked in an Army Affiliate Research Center, the ICT Mixed Reality Lab at the University of Southern California. And one of the things that I worked on was a project called BraveMind. And I was not by any means really deeply involved with the day-to-day of that program. I was just a lab technician, a tech monkey, making a lot of the head-mounted displays work. But that was a program that was using virtual reality exposure therapy to treat veterans with PTSD in the US Army. And that was the first time that I was really exposed to how the DoD works with technology, how they think about technology. And it had always stuck in my head that that was something that I'd like to contribute to, that I would like to make better. You know, there were a lot of things that were broken, despite a lot of the good that was being done. The goal of Anduril is to become the next major defense prime. And one of the ways that we thought about this is figuring out what would a major defense prime look like if they started today. If you were reading science fiction set in the future, what would the backstory of a company like Anduril be? What kinds of technologies would it have built? What would make it believable? And it's clearly exactly the things that we're working on. Autonomy, artificial intelligence, swarming systems, really high-end command and control software. One thing that people don't realize is that Anduril is already directly saving lives. We're already keeping people alive using our technology who would not be alive today if it wasn't for our technology. For one example, we make security systems that are used to protect military bases around the world from hostile incursions. We make technology that's used to protect people from getting attacked by drones. And these aren't hypotheticals. These aren't things that we want to do someday. We're sending systems into combat that are protecting people from hostile incursions and hostile drone attacks. And I can't talk about the details for obvious reasons, but people should realize that this isn't a hypothetical that our tech might someday do some good. It is doing incredibly good things right now, today, as we speak. Anduril does business differently because we only get paid when we make things that work, not when we do work. Most contracts that the DoD gives out are what's called a cost-plus contract. You get paid for time, materials, hours, and then a fixed percentage of profit on top, which means you're naturally incentivized as a major defense company to make things that are as expensive as possible, to work as long as possible. I'm not saying that people wake up in the morning and say, another day, another chance to screw the US taxpayer, but you naturally end up trending in that direction because you make more money when your project goes longer, more money when you come up with more expensive things. In Anduril, we don't look at it that way. Because we're funding the early development of our own programs, we wanted to find the most effective thing at the most cost-effective price point, and then work as quickly as possible so that we can actually sell that. And that difference in incentives is what drives the difference in results. Working in the defense space requires a lot of different and varied space. It's not like a software startup where you can just have a few guys and a few laptops and you just bang out on the keyboard in your living room. A lot of great companies have been built that way. But to work in the defense space, you have to have cleared space where you can work on sensitive projects to government standards. You have to be able to build hardware, you have to be able to build software, you have to be able to host demonstrations of your capabilities. You need to be able to burn things in and test them in a really robust fashion. You can't afford for things to fail. You can't really move fast and break things when lives are on the line. One of the biggest challenges we had breaking into this industry is that it is an industry that is really dominated by a handful of large primes who then subcontract all of their work to much smaller vendors. We wanted to be the next major prime. The goal of Anduril from day one was to save taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars a year by making tens of billions of dollars a year, making cheaper technology that does better things, and being the prime on it, getting to decide how it's built, how it's contracted, how it's sold. As a new entrant, it's really, really hard to get the government to take you seriously. You really have to build things that are so good that they can't ignore you. You can't just be better than what they're using. You have to be so much radically better that they have to pay attention to it. If I was learning how to run a company for the first time alongside all of that, there's no way that Anduril would have been successful. It was hugely helpful that I've actually started a multi-billion-dollar company before. The defense space is definitely not a space where I would encourage first-time founders to look to. I understand why they do it. It's because they're patriotic. It's because they want to make a difference. They want to work on something more important than augmented reality mustache emojis. But this is a really, really tough business, and I would strongly encourage people to get some business, to get some experience out in the real world before you try to live in the bizarro world that is defense contracting. The United States is in a really interesting position right now. where the technology companies that really dominate our tech industry largely refuse to do work with the US Department of Defense. There's never been a point in history where that was the case. And that would be okay if it was just in a vacuum. I don't mind us actually having a weak military if we don't need a military. The problem is that we live in a time where major powers like Russia and China are heavily investing in exactly the types of technologies that we are not good at building. People laugh at China because they don't have a large blue water navy, or because we have a bigger air force or a more powerful air force. We need to realize they're not planning on winning by building the tools that we used to win the last few wars. They're going to build asymmetrical capabilities, largely built on top of autonomous systems, and then they're going to use their manufacturing advantages to come after us, especially China. And so that's the reason that I really became really fearful, because we live in this situation where the United States has always had an edge. We've always had the strongest military, we've always had the best technology, our partners have always relied on us largely because of that. And we're now living in an area where some of our strategic adversaries are rushing ahead of us with technology like artificial intelligence. The fundamental goal of every company working in the defense space should be to deter conflict. Most conflicts occur when one or both sides miscalculate the odds of winning. When both sides agree that a conflict either can be won or cannot be won, they tend to be resolved through more diplomatic means. And so the goal of the United States has largely been not to ensure that we will win wars against every person that we might ever fight with. It's to prevent them from ever even wanting to fight us, so that conflict is unthinkable. If you don't start working on technology for the DoD until after the conflict starts, you ensure that whatever you build will only be a part of the conflict, a part of the bloodshed. It is not going to be a part of deterring the conflict from happening in the first place. That's what Anduril's trying to do. We're trying to build the tools that make warfare unthinkable.
27 years, 15 majors, and 5 back surgeries after turning pro. The world's most popular golfer is now the newest member of the 3 Comma Club.
When Tiger's in town, there's always a crowd.
Triumph, injury, scandal, failure, and triumph again have filled the years since Tiger Woods first stalked the fairways at the 1997 Masters. But through it all, the 46-year-old Woods has maintained his supremacy as one of the top-earning athletes in the world, raking in over $1.7 billion in salary, endorsements, and other income over the course of his 27-year career, more than anyone else we've tracked. Forbes now estimates his net worth to be at least $1 billion, making him one of just 2 active athletes to achieve billionaire status, along with NBA superstar LeBron James. Michael Jordan, the only other athlete billionaire, didn't hit 10 digits until after he retired, thanks to a well-timed investment in the NBA's Charlotte Hornets. Less than 10% of Woods' career earnings and net worth come from golf winnings. He amassed his fortune primarily through enormous endorsement deals with brands like Nike, Gatorade, and Rolex. He's also assembled an impressive real estate portfolio, including Jupiter, Florida, and owns chunks of businesses such as a restaurant called The Woods and an operator of upscale mini golf courses with plans to expand nationwide.
The centre of attention even on the practice range. Tiger Woods preparing for his second round with all the meticulous attention to detail, which has turned him into what many believe is the best player the world has ever seen.
Woods' impact on golf's TV ratings and purse sizes cannot be overstated.
10,000 fans came to watch this year's 3-time major winner tame the green at Hyde Park.
In the early 2000s, according to former CBS president Neil Pilson, TV audiences would drop 30 to 50% when Woods was not in contention at a tournament. This so-called Tiger effect contributed to PGA Tour winnings nearly tripling between 1996 and 2008, a stretch in which Woods won 14 major championships. And that's helped the off-field bucks get much bigger too. There's a long tradition, spanning Babe Ruth to Arnold Palmer to Jordan, of athletes getting paid to endorse brands. But now the endorsement potential stretches into the 3 commas, thanks to the amplifying effect of modern media and technology. Woods, for example, has over 10 million followers across Twitter, Instagram, and other social media platforms. At his peak, Woods was the most prolific athlete endorser in history, earning north of $100 million per year off the course. He held the #1 spot in Forbes' highest paid athletes list for 10 consecutive years, ending in 2012. Even now, despite hardly ever teeing the ball up over the past 12 months while recovering from a serious car accident, Woods collected $68 million in off-course income, enough to make him the 14th highest paid athlete in the world. Woods has used his status and earnings to expand his business, which now includes a golf design business, a live events production company, and a restaurant. Woods is also identified as a partner in a SPAC announced in January. When combined with his real estate holdings, Woods' wealth is secured, whether or not he ever swings a golf club again.
When, in math and science and physics and, these fields, there's always a right answer. You're right or you're wrong. And I actually think that teaches you some of the wrong lessons. I remember really vividly some of my early violin lessons where you could get all the notes right, but that actually isn't what mattered. What mattered is that you could weave through the notes the emotion and the story that the original composer was trying to convey. And I think it was a really powerful lesson, because I think, one thing that many of us learn over time is that a lot of times it's not about something being clinically correct or clinically right or exactly right. It's about how they kind of make people feel. And I think that definitely is true in technology, and it's definitely true in everything that we try to build. My name's Alexandr Wang. I'm the CEO and founder of Scale AI. Scale AI is the data infrastructure for AI to power the most ambitious AI projects in the world. Every organization wants to implement AI, but oftentimes the biggest bottleneck in their way is being able to create really high quality data and data sets to power that AI. At Scale, we sort of view data as the core problem of building great AI, whereas a lot of other companies view it as an afterthought, and that really prevents AI from having sort of the magnitude of outcomes that it's able to have. We've raised over $600 million to date, and we work with everywhere from the largest automakers in the world, like Toyota and General Motors, to the United States Department of Defense, to some of the largest enterprises in the world, like Microsoft, Square, and PayPal, and some of the leading AI research organizations, like OpenAI. When you learn how to program for the first time, it's kind of shocking, but you actually are generally sort of telling the computer to do very simple things. The art of programming traditionally is the art of sort of giving computers very black and white instructions, very simple instructions that anybody could follow. And one of the beauties of AI is that you actually have the ability to program computers with judgment and with reasoning and with sort of nuanced understanding of the world. And so you can have an AI system look at an image and tell you what's in the image, or listen to an audio snippet and understand what's being said. And it is sort of this incredible enabler for what computers can do, or the power of computing. And in general, I think we've already seen sort of over the past many decades what the power of computers and computing and mobile phones and all that stuff has been on humanity. And I think AI and machine learning has a huge opportunity to do the same. Both my parents are physicists, and I grew up in the small town in New Mexico called Los Alamos, New Mexico, where there's a national lab, and a lot of the people I grew up with had parents who were scientists of some sort. It was a sort of very special place. And my mom, from a very young age, taught me about math and physics and science, and she taught me with such wonders. I was really impatient as a kid. I think I always wanted to be learning more, or I always wanted to be doing more, always wanted to sort of be accomplishing more. And so I actually, I left high school after my junior year of high school, and then moved out to Silicon Valley to work as a software engineer. I learned so much about building products, about what it meant to sort of like be metrics focused and data focused, and what it sort of meant to build great software. And then that's when I was inspired by AI. I sort of saw it in my daily work and I was like, AI is really cool. And I went back to MIT, and then after about a year of MIT, I dropped out to start Scale. We have over 500 people now, so it's pretty insane to watch, what originally started as a few people in the basement of our investor to what it's sort of become. Where we started was in autonomous vehicles and self-driving, and I think it was one of the first real use cases and applications of AI that I think caught the imagination of the world. What if we could have unlimited, easy, eco-friendly transportation everywhere in the world through autonomous vehicles? One of the examples that we get really excited about is in healthcare. In healthcare, there's a huge bottleneck in the number of doctors, trained doctors all around the world, and there's incredible potential for AI and machine learning to actually analyze as many of the cases as possible automatically before needing escalation to a doctor, so the doctor can spend their time on cases with anomalies or erratic data or whatnot. And so at Scale, we actually did research with MIT on using AI and machine learning to analyze dermatology data and dermatology imaging to see how AI could actually automate that process and then therefore unblock the sort of doctor bottleneck. Another use case that I'm really passionate about is using AI to help solve some of the largest geopolitical problems and working with governments in being able to sort of provide technology to aid in some of these very tough and tricky situations. In the war with Russia and Ukraine, we actually deployed Scale's technology in understanding satellite imagery of major Ukrainian cities, Kharkiv, Kiev, and Dnipro, to understand what was the amount of damage in key parts of these cities. And so we analyzed using machine learning as well as satellite imagery and identified all sorts of structures in these cities where there was meaningful damage that wasn't otherwise being addressed or captured by humanitarian efforts. And so I'm incredibly excited by our work there and actually enabling sort of humanitarian efforts, enabling us to respond to some of the world's most pressing and exigent problems. In the world of AI, there's, I think, a lot of very smart people, but who are focused, so far out in the future that it's almost unhelpful. There's so many people focused on what's going to happen when we have AGI or what's going to happen, 2 or 3 decades in the future. And I think there's not enough people who are really focused on what are the problems that we have today and how can we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to really change the game today. And so I think what's next for us is to be the people, some of the people, hopefully in the world, who are focused on how do we solve some of the biggest problems today around climate, around agriculture, around geopolitics, around medicine, and really start making an impact, now.